I never thought a simple text message could rip through me like a bullet. But there it was, barely 10 words that shattered years of loyalty and sacrifice. Hey, just wanted to let you know the guest list is finalized, and we had to make some tough cuts. Hope you understand. Love you. Tough cuts. Love you? Was he serious? I wasn't some distant cousin or an old family friend. I was his sister. The same sister who had been by Ethan's side through everything: his heartbreaks, his career meltdowns, even the time I loaned him money to cover rent when he was too proud to ask our parents. I blinked at the screen, reading the message for the 5th time, hoping I had somehow misunderstood. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe Ethan meant to send that to someone else. I didn't realize I was gripping my phone so tightly until my knuckles turned white. I felt the familiar ache of disappointment settling into my chest, but this time, it was different. It wasn't just disappointment, it was anger. I dialed Dad's number, and he picked up on the second ring. His voice was as cheerful as ever. "Hey, sweetheart, what's up?" I didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Dad," I said, my voice strained but steady. "I just got a text from Ethan. He says I'm not invited to his wedding. Is this some kind of joke?" There was a pause. Not long enough to be genuine surprise, just long enough to confirm what I already feared. "Oh, honey," he sighed, his tone shifting into that condescending voice he always used when I was being too emotional. "It's just a wedding. Don't make a big deal out of this. Just a wedding." Just like it was just my birthday he forgot last year, or just another time I was expected to drop everything and be there for him. "Dad, I'm his sister," I said, my voice now dangerously calm. "How am I not invited to my own brother's wedding?" Dad sighed again, louder this time, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "They had to keep the list small, Emma. It's nothing personal." "Nothing personal?" I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. "I just saw his Instagram post. He invited 150 people, Dad. But not me?" Silence. A forced chuckle followed, but it was hollow. "You know how these things are, honey. Weddings are expensive. Maybe they thought you wouldn't mind skipping this one. Wouldn't mind?" I felt something inside me snap. For years, I had swallowed my feelings, played the understanding daughter, the supportive sister. But this was beyond betrayal, right? I murmured, barely able to contain the storm brewing beneath my calm facade. I could already predict how this would go. I'd argue. Dad would brush me off. Ethan would send some half-hearted apology after the wedding, and I'd be expected to forgive and forget because that's what I always did. Not this time. I hung up without another word, my heart pounding as I stared out the window. If I wasn't good enough to be part of Ethan's big day, fine. But I wasn't going to sit around wallowing in self-pity while they played happy family without me. No, this time, I was going to do something different. If Ethan was having the best day of his life, then I was about to have the best week of mine. I didn't cry, not right away. Instead, I sat there, my phone still in my hand, scrolling through Instagram like some kind of masochist. Every swipe was another knife, twisting deeper into my chest. Final dress fitting with my bridesmaids. Venue walkthrough complete. Can't wait for the big day. There was Ethan grinning like an idiot, surrounded by people I barely recognized. Old college friends, distant cousins we hadn't seen in years, and colleagues who probably wouldn't even remember his middle name. But me, his sister? Nowhere in sight. My throat tightened, but I refused to let the tears fall. I wasn't going to give them that. Not yet. 150 people. Ethan had invited 150 people to his stupid wedding, and I wasn't one of them. I put my phone down, my mind racing through all the times I had been there for him. I was the one who talked him off the ledge after his breakup with Julia, the girl who dumped him right before their anniversary. I stayed up all night with him, letting him cry on my shoulder while I pretended not to hate her guts. I helped him move twice. I covered half his rent when he lost his job and didn't want to ask Dad for help. I defended him when Mom said he was wasting his potential. And for what? To be treated like an afterthought? I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, but it wasn't from sadness anymore. It was anger. How did I let this happen? I had spent so many years being the understanding one, the one who didn't make waves, the one who put everyone else first. And what did that get me? Cut from the guest list. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. It was almost funny if it wasn't so damn pathetic. My phone buzzed. Jess. I opened the message, grateful for the distraction. OMG. M. Did you see Ethan's Insta story? I rolled my eyes. Oh, I'd seen it all right. Yeah, I saw. A moment later, another message popped up. Look, I know you're hurt, but something's off. I overheard Mom and Ethan talking the other day, and I don't think it's just about the guest list. My eyebrows knitted together. What do you mean? I'm not sure yet, but I'll find out. Just don't do anything drastic. I stared at the screen, Jess's words echoing in my mind. Something's off. My stomach churned. I didn't need to be told twice. I had learned a long time ago that when Jess smelled drama, she was rarely wrong. But at that moment, I didn't care about the why. All I could think about was how I had let myself get pushed aside again. Not this time. I stood up, pacing around my apartment as the weight of everything settled on me. My mind raced through scenarios confronting Ethan, making a scene at the wedding, or maybe just disappearing altogether. But then, an idea hit me. I stopped mid-step, a slow smile creeping onto my face. If I wasn't invited to Ethan's perfect little wedding, fine. But that didn't mean I had to sit around feeling sorry for myself. I deserved better. And for once in my life, I was going to put myself first. My fingers flew across my phone screen as I started searching. Flights, resorts, vacation packages. If Ethan was going to have the best day of his life, then I was about to have the best week of mine. I didn't waste any more time. The moment I decided I wasn't going to sit around moping while Ethan lived out his fairy tale wedding, something shifted inside me. For the first time in forever, I wasn't going to put myself last. I grabbed my laptop, my fingers moving faster than my thoughts. Flights, resorts, getaways. I wasn't looking for some budget-friendly, last-minute deal. I was looking for luxury. If they're going to treat me like I'm invisible, I muttered to myself, then I'm going to disappear properly. I scrolled through endless options until one caught my eye, a 5-star resort in the Caribbean. Ocean view suite, private beach, all-inclusive. It was extravagant, ridiculous, exactly what I needed. I clicked book now without hesitation, a week away from everything. From the wedding, from the guilt-tripping texts I knew were coming, from a family that only remembered I existed when they needed something. Done. A confirmation email popped up instantly, and I couldn't help but smile. Guess I'm not on the guest list, I whispered, pulling up Instagram, but I think I'll survive. I snapped a quick picture of my suitcase by the door, captioned it, "Sometimes the best RSVP is a first-class ticket out of town." The comments rolled in almost immediately. Jess, OMG. Where are you going? Spill. Mike, that's the spirit. Leave them in the dust. Random coworker, ugh, jealous. Take me with you. But the best part? Ethan viewed my story. Oh, so now I had his attention? Good. 2 days later, the moment I stepped off the plane, the warm Caribbean breeze kissed my skin, carrying with it the scent of salt, sunscreen, and freedom. A private car was waiting for me, complete with a chilled towel and a bottle of water so fancy I was almost afraid to open it. "Welcome, Miss Reed." The driver greeted me with a polite smile. "Straight to the resort? Please." As the sleek black SUV glided along the coastal highway, I finally exhaled, feeling the weight I'd been carrying for years start to lift. No family drama, no expectations, just me. The resort was something out of a dream. Towering palm trees framed the open-air lobby, where I was greeted with a fruity cocktail and a warm smile. The ocean stretched out endlessly in the distance, shimmering under the midday sun. But it was my suite that sealed the deal. Floor-to-ceiling windows with an uninterrupted view of the ocean, a private balcony with a hammock that practically begged me to sink into it, and the king-size bed. I could already picture myself sprawling across it without a care in the world. I threw my bags down, stepped onto the balcony, and just breathed. "This," I murmured, a satisfied smile tugging at the corners of my lips, "is what I deserve." And then, because I couldn't resist, I snapped a picture of the view: white sand, turquoise waves, pure bliss, and posted it with the caption, "When one door closes, another one opens, preferably to a beachside suite with unlimited margaritas." A few hours later, I was stretched out by the infinity pool, a cocktail in one hand and a novel I had no intention of finishing in the other. The sun was warm on my skin, the water sparkling like liquid diamonds. For the first time in years, I felt weightless. I wasn't checking my phone, waiting for a text that would never come. I wasn't worrying about Ethan's wedding or how my absence might ruin his big day. I was free. But then, like clockwork, my phone buzzed. I ignored it. Another buzz. Nope. Then a third buzz, followed by the familiar ding of a notification. I sighed, grabbing my phone with one hand while taking another sip of my drink. 50 plus new notifications. What now? I muttered, unlocking the screen. My eyes skimmed through the flood of messages, and that's when I saw it. Ethan's wedding had just turned into a full-blown disaster. Jess's updates were pure gold. Jess, OMG, you are not going to believe this. Me, try me. Jess, the groom walked out, like straight up left the venue. Me, wait, what? Jess, yeah. Apparently, he and Ethan got into some massive fight during the reception. Jess, oh, and Uncle Rob and Dad got into a screaming match about family loyalty. Jess, Grandma cried. The bar cut off drinks early. Total chaos. I nearly choked on my drink. The groom left. Karma, you beautiful, ruthless queen. I scrolled through the messages, each one better than the last. Jess had painted a vivid picture of a wedding gone catastrophically wrong, and I couldn't help but grin. Me. So, let me get this straight. Ethan cut me out, and now his perfect day is falling apart? Jess, yup. And everyone is freaking out, trying to figure out where you are. Me, oh, they know where I am. I smirked, snapping another picture of my sun-kissed legs stretched out by the pool, cocktail in hand. Busy enjoying my overreaction, I hit send, and the satisfaction was immediate. By the time the sun set, I had ignored at least a dozen missed calls from my dad and 2 frantic voicemails from Ethan. Emma, please call me back. It's important. I know you're upset, but I really need you right now. Oh, now I was important? Too bad. I turned my phone on Do Not Disturb, waved over the bartender for another drink, and leaned back in my chair with a satisfied sigh. Let them clean up their own mess, because for once, I was exactly where I was supposed to be miles away, living my best life. I woke up to the sound of waves crashing softly against the shore, the morning breeze carrying the scent of salt and tropical flowers through my open balcony doors. Pure bliss. Stretching lazily, I ran my fingers through my tousled hair and reached for my phone, which I had purposely left face down on the nightstand all night. Do Not Disturb was still on. Good. The last thing I needed was a barrage of guilt-laced voicemails or frantic texts from my family. I had given them enough of my time, years, in fact. This week, this was for me. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. With a sigh, I turned off Do Not Disturb and watched as my phone immediately lit up like a Christmas tree. 67 missed calls, 32 voicemails, 100 plus text messages. What the hell? I mumbled, eyebrows furrowing as I scrolled through the notifications. My heart skipped a beat when I saw most of the messages were from Dad and Ethan. Dad, Emma, call me now. It's a family emergency. Ethan, I know you're upset. Please pick up. I need you. Dad, I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is serious. Ethan, please, Emma. I'm begging you. Begging? Ethan never begged. My curiosity got the better of me. I scrolled further and spotted a message from Jess, my unofficial family informant. Jess, girl, I know you're living your best life, but you need to call me ASAP. I have tea. If Jess was using all caps, it had to be serious. I dialed her number, and she picked up after the first ring. Oh my God, finally, Jess practically shrieked. You are not going to believe what happened. Good morning to you too, I said, my voice dripping with amusement as I wandered back to my balcony. Emma, I mean it. Buckle up. I leaned against the railing, gazing out at the endless blue ocean. All right, hit me. The wedding was a total shit show. A grin tugged at the corners of my lips. Do tell. Flashback to the wedding from hell. According to Jess, it all started during the reception. The guests were milling around, enjoying their overpriced cocktails, when Ethan and the groom, Ryan, got into a heated argument. Apparently, Jess whispered, like she was telling me a state secret. Ryan overheard Ethan bitching about how he was the one carrying the relationship and how he deserved better. Wait, what? I nearly choked. Oh yeah, Ethan was running his mouth about how Ryan wasn't too emotional and that he needed someone who wouldn't hold him back. Jesus. So Ryan confronted him right there, in front of the bridal party. And let's just say, Jess paused for dramatic effect, It did not go well. My jaw dropped. No way. Oh, it gets better. Jess was practically giddy. Ryan told Ethan he was done. Like, done. He walked out of the venue, left Ethan standing there like a total idiot. The groom left. I had to sit down for that one. I perched on the edge of my chaise lounge, phone pressed to my ear, as Jess continued her rapid-fire recap. Then, she added, Dad and Uncle Rob started arguing. Apparently, Uncle Rob said something about how this wouldn't have happened if you'd been there to keep Ethan in line. Me? My eyes widened. How is this my fault? Girl, you know how they are. Blame the person who's not there. It's a family tradition. I rolled my eyes so hard they nearly fell out of my head. Let me guess, Grandma cried. Like a Hallmark movie, Jess confirmed, stifling a laugh. And the cherry on top? The venue cut the bar early because people were getting too rowdy. Wow. I let out a low whistle. So, Ethan's dream wedding turned into a nightmare? Yup. And now, everyone is losing their damn minds. Back to reality. Emma's sweet satisfaction. I let that sink in for a moment. A slow, satisfied smile spreading across my face. Karma. She had worked her magic in the most poetic way possible. So, I drawled, twirling my drink between my fingers. They're all freaking out. And what? Expecting me to swoop in and fix it? Bingo. Jess's voice dripped with amusement. Dad and Ethan have been calling everyone trying to find you. Mom's a wreck. And Ethan? Oh, honey, he's begging for you to come back. Begging? I smirked, savoring the word. Yup. Apparently, Ryan won't even talk to him. And Ethan thinks if you show up and mediate, everything will magically go back to normal. Ah, so now I'm important? I murmured, more to myself than Jess. Funny how that works, huh? I glanced at the turquoise waves stretching endlessly before me, the gentle breeze caressing my skin. I had never felt so free. And the idea of leaving all this behind to clean up Ethan's mess? Not a chance. One final touch of petty perfection. I grabbed my phone, flipping the camera to capture the breathtaking view of the beach. Sun, sand, and crystal clear water. Hold on, Jess, I said, grinning. I snapped the photo and added a caption that was dripping with sarcasm. Sorry, I'm a little busy enjoying my overreaction. Post. Jess's laughter echoed through the phone. Oh my God, iconic. You're going to break the internet. Good. I settled back into my lounge chair, sliding my sunglasses into place. Let them see what it feels like to be left out for once. Ethan's pleas go unanswered. I didn't check my phone for the rest of the day. By the time I finally glanced at it later that evening, the notifications had doubled. Voicemails from Dad, texts from Ethan, but I didn't open a single one. Instead, I turned my phone back to Do Not Disturb and poured myself another cocktail. They had made their bed. Now they could lie in it. The sweetest kind of silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. I raised my glass to the universe. To karma, I murmured with a satisfied smile. You never disappoint. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't cleaning up after my family's mess. This time, I was letting them drown in it. The next morning, I woke up without an alarm. No frantic texts, no guilt-tripping voicemails. Just the soothing sound of waves crashing against the shore and the warmth of the sun peeking through the sheer curtains of my ocean view suite. This was paradise. Stretching lazily, I yawned and rolled over, my body sinking deeper into the plush king-size bed that felt like a cloud. I had slept better these past few nights than I had in years. No family drama, no expectations, just me, finally putting myself first. And the best part? I didn't feel an ounce of guilt about it. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, half expecting another barrage of missed calls and frantic messages. 41 missed calls, 20 new voicemails, 100 plus unread messages. I snorted. They never learn. Ethan's name was all over my notifications. Ethan, Emma, please, just call me. Ethan, I'm serious. I need you, Ethan. You're really going to ignore me after everything? Oh, the irony. After everything, the same guy who had cut me out of his wedding without a second thought was now acting like I owed him something. Nope. I muttered under my breath, deleting the messages without even opening them. Blocked. I didn't need that negativity in my life. I scrolled down, seeing a few missed calls from Dad too. Dad, Emma, I don't know what's going on, but we need to talk. Dad, this is not the time to be acting childish. Dad, family sticks together. Don't make me come down there. Acting childish? I let out a dry laugh. Right. Right, because standing up for myself and refusing to be treated like an afterthought was childish. Not today, Dad, I murmured, hitting block on his number 2. Living my best life, with a deep breath, I tossed my phone aside and padded out onto the balcony. The view was even more breathtaking than I remembered. Crystal clear turquoise waves rolling gently onto the white sandy beach, palm trees swaying lazily in the breeze. I stretched my arms above my head, letting the sunlight kiss my skin as I closed my eyes and just breathed. For the first time in forever, I felt free. No obligations, no guilt. Just me, living the life I had always been too afraid to claim for myself. I spent the next few days fully embracing that freedom. Morning yoga on the beach, endless spa treatments, sipping cocktails by the infinity pool while reading trashy romance novels. I even booked a sunset cruise where I watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. With a glass of champagne in my hand and the wind in my hair, this, I thought as I stood at the edge of the boat, is what happiness feels like. One last message for closure. But as much as I was loving my newfound independence, I knew I had one last thing to do. Closure. Pulling out my phone, I scrolled through my blocked contacts list and, for just a moment, considered unblocking Ethan. But no, he didn't deserve that. Instead, I sent one final message to the family group chat before officially leaving the chat for good. Me. Oh, now I'm important? After being cut from the guest list and treated like an afterthought? Sorry, I'm too busy enjoying my overreaction. Clean up your own mess. I'm done. Delivered. Then, without waiting for a response, I left the chat and blocked the entire group. Goodbye, guilt. Goodbye, toxic family dynamics. I was done being their emotional punching bag. Peace. Finally. The next morning I woke up feeling lighter. I didn't check my phone. I didn't care what fallout my message had caused. Not my circus, not my monkeys. Instead, I ordered room service fluffy pancakes, fresh tropical fruit, and a mimosa so bright it practically sparkled. As I ate on the balcony, the sun warming my skin, I realized something that sent a wave of calm through me. I didn't miss them. Not the constant stress, not the feeling of being invisible, not the pressure to fix everything for everyone. I missed myself. And now, I had her back home. But not back to them. When my flight landed a week later, I felt like a completely different person. I had extended my stay for another week, soaking in every second of freedom. And when I finally returned, I walked through my front door with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. But as much as I loved my home, I had no intention of letting them drag me back into their chaos. Jess was the only person I had kept unblocked. And, true to form, she wasted no time filling me in the moment I got back. Jess, girl, you missed so much. Ethan's been calling everyone trying to get to you. Jess, oh, and Grandma? She's convinced the wedding was cursed because they left you out. It's hilarious. I laughed out loud, shaking my head. Karma's got a wicked sense of humor. Jess, so, are you gonna talk to them? Nope. Jess, good. They don't deserve you. Damn right they don't. I tossed my phone aside and poured myself a glass of wine. I had spent too many years trying to earn their love and approval. But now, I was done chasing after people who didn't value me. Final reflection. Zero regrets. As I sat on my couch, sipping my wine and watching the sunset through my window, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. No guilt, no stress, no regrets. Just me, finally living the life I deserved. And as the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, I raised my glass in a silent toast. To freedom, I whispered, a satisfied smile tugging at my lips, and to never being anyone's backup plan ever again. Because for the first time in a long time, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Story 2. I've been with my company for about 6 years now. And for the most part, it's been a decent ride. Good pay, manageable workload, and benefits that made sticking around worth it. But every office has that one guy, the one who somehow manages to coast through without lifting a finger. For us, that guy was Dan. Dan was a master at the art of doing absolutely nothing. If there was a way to dodge work, Dan found it. He'd stroll in late, disappear for extended breaks, and be out the door early. And when he was actually at his desk, he'd be scrolling through his phone, cracking jokes, or chatting up anyone who was unlucky enough to be within earshot. But the worst part? Dan knew he was untouchable. Why? Because Dan was best buddies with our manager, Chris. They had been tight since college. Same frat, same weekend hangouts. They had that unshakable brotherhood bond that meant Dan got away with everything. If someone complained about Dan, Chris brushed it off like it was nothing. And if you tried to hold Dan accountable, forget it. He'd smirk, lean back in his chair, and say something like, "Man, you guys try way too hard." It's all about knowing the right people. Infuriating? Absolutely. But it wasn't just the laziness that grated on everyone. Dan loved rubbing it in. He'd brag about how little he had to do, laughing at how everyone else was busting their asses while he coasted. Whenever something frustrating happened at work, Dan would casually drop, "Good thing I don't have to worry about that." And he wasn't wrong. For years, Dan skated by, protected by Chris. No one could touch him until everything changed. The promotion that shook everything up. A few months ago, the company announced a restructuring. They were creating a new senior team lead position, a step toward management with a nice raise and actual decision-making power. Everyone knew it was a big deal. And of course, Dan started running his mouth. "Chris already told me it's mine," he said, one afternoon, lounging in his chair while sipping on an overpriced latte. "Guess I'll have to start pretending to work once I get that title." We all knew he didn't deserve it, but after years of watching Dan get away with everything, I was half convinced he'd actually land the promotion. But I wasn't about to roll over. I'd been busting my ass for years, doing my job and picking up the slack for people like Dan. I was qualified. I deserved that promotion. So I applied. The interview process was brutal. I prepped, researched, and came ready with ideas. Dan, he walked in like he already had the job, probably thinking he'd charm his way through. But when the announcement came, I got the job. The moment it all fell apart. The moment my name was called, I could feel Dan's eyes burning into me. His face froze in shock, a mix of disbelief and fury. I could practically see the gears turning in his head as he stormed out of the room. I barely had time to process my win before it happened. My office door flew open so hard it bounced off the wall. Dan stood there, fists clenched, face bright red. "You stole my job," he spat, voice shaking with rage. "Chris told me it was mine." I leaned back in my chair, keeping my voice calm. I guess Richard thought otherwise. Richard was our department director, the one with the final say on promotions. Dan must have forgotten that Chris didn't have as much power as he thought. Dan's face darkened, his jaw clenching as he pointed a trembling finger at me. "You don't deserve this. You're just..." He stopped himself, probably realizing that saying, "You actually work hard," wasn't the insult he was going for. "I guess management disagrees," I said with a shrug. Dan's breathing was heavy, his eyes narrowing. "You think this is over?" he hissed. "You have no idea who you're messing with." Then he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I let out a slow breath, thinking, well, that could have gone worse. I was wrong. It was just beginning. The sabotage begins. I came in the next morning thinking Dan would cool off or, at the very least, avoid me. Nope. Dan wasn't the type to take a loss quietly. At first, it was little things. Passive-aggressive comments in meetings. A fake smile paired with a sarcastic, "Wow. Must be tough being in charge now." But then it escalated. Emails the first sent mysteriously went missing. Reports the first requested never landed on my desk. Deadlines were forgotten. It didn't take a genius to figure out what was happening. Dan still had connections. Chris was still in his corner. And some of the lazier co-workers, the ones who resented that I'd been promoted instead of Dan, quietly joined in. They started making my life hell. One afternoon I was leading a project meeting when one of my coworkers, Mike, spoke up. "Hey, so Dan mentioned you were changing the deadlines without telling us?" I blinked. "What?" "Yeah," Mike said, shifting uncomfortably. "He said you were pushing things up to make yourself look good." I felt a cold wave of anger. "That's not true," I said firmly. "If anyone's confused, they can check the email chain." Mike shrugged. "That's not what Dan said." I clenched my jaw. Dan was spreading rumors, turning people against me, making me look like an arrogant, power-hungry jerk. And the worst part, it was working. People started treating me differently. Conversations stopped when I walked into the break room. Co-workers who used to be friendly kept their distance. Years of hard work were being undone in days. But Dan? Dan was about to make one very stupid mistake. The smoking gun one afternoon, while going through my inbox, I noticed an email chain about a major client project. I had sent out a request for a final review, but no one had responded. We were on a tight deadline, and if we missed it, the client would be furious. I scrolled through the thread, frustrated, until I saw it. A forwarded message from Dan. Attached to my original email was a note from Dan. Ignore this. Let's see how long it takes before the big boss freaks out. My hands clenched into fists. I finally had proof. I didn't hesitate. I forwarded the email to Richard with no explanation, just the proof. Minutes later, I got a reply. Come to my office, now. Laying the trap, Richard was calm, but I could see the tension in his jaw when I entered his office. He was staring at his screen, reading the forwarded email. When did this happen? He asked, his voice even. Yesterday. I just saw the forwarded message now, I replied. Richard exhaled slowly. I had a feeling, he murmured. I frowned. A feeling? Richard turned his monitor toward me. My stomach dropped. It was a report from it. Someone had been accessing files they had no business touching. Performance reports, meeting minutes, even my emails. And the login credentials? Dan's. Richard gave me a knowing look. I started looking into this after I promoted you. Too many miscommunications. Too many things going missing. I wanted to be sure before acting. I was stunned. So, you already suspected him? I had a feeling, Richard said again. But this? He pointed at the email I had forwarded. This just made my decision a lot easier. I expected Richard to march down the hall and fire Dan on the spot. But instead, he smirked. No, he said. We're going to do this properly. And that's when things got really interesting. For the next couple of weeks, I played it cool, like nothing had happened. I greeted Dan in the hallways with the same polite nod, endured his smug little comments in meetings, and pretended. I didn't notice how he was still trying to undermine me. But behind the scenes, Richard and I were building a case. See, Richard didn't just want to fire Dan, he wanted to bury him. Quietly, he involved HR and legal. They needed everything locked down, documentation, evidence, witnesses. Dan had been sloppy. His arrogance had made him reckless, and he left a trail that was too easy to follow. The plan was simple. Let Dan keep digging his own grave. And Dan, he didn't disappoint. The final push, it started small. More missing emails, more accidental oversights. Dan was testing how far he could push before I snapped, but I didn't give him the satisfaction. I kept my cool, even when he was baiting me with those little jabs in meetings. Must be tough keeping up with all those deadlines now, he'd say with a fake smile. Hope you're not too overwhelmed. I'd smile back and respond calmly. I'm managing just fine. Thanks for your concern. But Dan wasn't satisfied with little victories. He wanted to break me, and that's where he messed up. One morning, I got a panicked message from Mark, one of the senior developers. Dude, the entire shared project folder is gone. What? I froze. I mean gone, Mark said, his voice tight. Not archived. Not moved. Deleted. I felt a wave of cold fury wash over me. Who had access? I asked, already knowing the answer. Only the senior leads. And Dan. My jaw clenched. Call it. Get the access logs. The smoking gun, part 2. It didn't take long for it to trace it back. The culprit? Dan. And the best part? He had done it from his work computer. Richard's patience was running thin. It's time, he said, a gleam of satisfaction in his eyes. The big reveal: Richard didn't just call Dan into his office. He made it public. He scheduled an emergency team meeting, inviting everyone involved in the project. The whole team gathered in the conference room, murmuring quietly, clearly wondering what was going on. I took a seat near the front, trying to stay neutral, even though I knew what was coming. Richard walked in, calm as ever, and clicked on the screen at the front of the room. A report popped up, a detailed log showing exactly who had deleted the shared project folder and when. There was a long silence as everyone processed what they were looking at. Then Richard turned to Dan. Anything you'd like to say, Dan? Dan's face went pale. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He glanced around the room, probably hoping someone would bail him out. But this time, no one had his back. Even Chris, his so-called best friend, was sitting stone-faced, avoiding eye contact. Finally, Dan let out a nervous laugh. That has to be a mistake, he mumbled. I didn't. It confirmed it was done from your credentials, Richard said smoothly, cutting him off. From your computer. Dan's eyes darted around the room again, looking for a lifeline that wasn't there. His bravado was gone. He was sweating, his jaw clenched so tight I thought he might crack a tooth. And then, in true Dan fashion, he did the dumbest thing imaginable. The meltdown, instead of admitting defeat gracefully, Dan decided to go out with a bang. This is bullshit, he exploded. exploded, standing up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. "You're all out to get me. This whole thing is rigged." His voice rose, echoing off the conference room walls. "I was supposed to get that promotion, but no, you gave it to him." He jabbed a finger in my direction. "You all act like I'm the bad guy, but I've been here longer. I deserve better than this." No one said a word. The silence was deafening. Richard didn't even blink. He let Dan rant, let him dig his grave deeper with every word. Then, when Dan finally stopped to catch his breath, Richard slid a piece of paper across the table. A termination notice. Dan stared at it like it was a foreign object. What? What is this?" he whispered, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's official," Richard said calmly. "You're done." The walk of shame security was called to escort Dan out, and let me tell you, that was a sight. Dan threw a full-blown tantrum on the way out. He yelled, cursed, and made wild threats about lawsuits and how we'd all regret this. But no one cared. People watched in silence, some shaking their heads, others exchanging amused glances. As Dan was dragged out, I heard him shout one last desperate line. "You haven't seen the last of me." I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. Dan was gone, but something in my gut told me this wasn't over. The aftermath and new threats. The office felt lighter after Dan was gone. People who had been walking on eggshells for months finally relaxed. Conversations started flowing naturally again. I should have felt victorious. I had finally gotten rid of Dan, and his toxic presence was no longer poisoning the office. But that uneasy feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. And I was right. That evening, as I was packing up to leave, my phone buzzed. I glanced down and saw an email from an anonymous account. The subject line, "Read this before it's too late." My stomach dropped as I opened it. The message was short, but it sent a chill down my spine. "You think you've won? Think again. I know things about this company that could burn it to the ground, and I'm not going down alone." There was no name, but I didn't need one. I knew who it was. Dan wasn't done. The storm hits. The next morning, chaos erupted. Dan had sent a mass email, not just to our department, but to the entire company. Every single employee, from interns to the executive team, got a message with the subject line, "The truth about company name." The content? A long, rambling mess filled with accusations. Dan claimed leadership was corrupt, promotions were rigged, and Chris had covered up multiple scandals. He even implied that Richard had manipulated company policies for his own gain. The worst part? Dan attached real company documents. I skimmed through them, my heart pounding. Most of it was nonsense, half-truths twisted into wild conspiracy theories. But a few things made my blood run cold. There were private messages, expense reports that didn't add up, and a suspicious hiring document with Chris's signature on it. Dan might have been lazy, but he wasn't stupid. He'd been quietly collecting dirt the entire time. And now, he was using it as a weapon. Crisis mode. I was barely in my office for 5 minutes before I got called into Richard's office. This time, Chris was already there, and he looked terrified. Richard stood by the window, arms crossed, staring out as if he was trying to calculate how bad this could get. "You've seen the email," Richard said quietly. I nodded. "Yeah." Chris looked like he was about to puke. "You're not actually believing any of that, are you?" His voice was shaky. Richard didn't answer right away. He just kept staring out the window. "Tell me," Richard finally said, turning to Chris. "How much of this is true?" Chris let out a nervous laugh. "Come on, man. This is Dan we're talking about. He's just pissed off because he got fired." Richard didn't look convinced. "We already did some digging," Richard said, pulling a folder from his desk and placing it in front of Chris. "Turns out, a lot of those expense reports under your name have been flagged. And those hiring documents for Dan?" Richard's eyes narrowed. "HR never approved them. So why do they have your signature on them?" Chris's face went pale. Richard cut him off. "Don't." The room was dead silent. "I vouched for him," Chris finally whispered, his voice barely audible. His head dropped into his hands. I didn't think he'd do this." "Well," Richard said, his tone cold, "pack up your things. You're done." The fallout: Chris was forced to resign. The company sent out a damage control email, calling Dan's claims exaggerations, but promising an internal investigation. Legal was already preparing a case against Dan for stealing confidential information. Dan had gone scorched earth, and in the process, he took Chris down with him. I half expected Dan to try and reach out to me one last time, to throw some parting threats my way. But he didn't, because this time, it was really over. With Dan and Chris both out, the office felt different, lighter, like a dark cloud had finally lifted. People who had been walking on eggshells for months were starting to relax. Conversations flowed more easily. Jokes returned to the break room, and for the first time in a while, I didn't feel like I was constantly looking over my shoulder. But even with Dan and Chris gone, the mess they left behind wasn't going to clean itself up overnight. Damage control mode. The company's PR team was in overdrive, trying to contain the fallout from Dan's email. Legal was already prepping for the inevitable lawsuit, and Richard was working overtime to ensure that every accusation was thoroughly investigated. Even though most of Dan's claims were exaggerated nonsense, there were a few things that couldn't just be swept under the rug. Expense reports that didn't add up, shady hiring practices, and whispers about favoritism that had been ignored for far too long. Richard wasn't taking any chances. He brought in an external audit team to go through everything with a fine-tooth comb. Every document, every approval, every policy. He wanted to make sure that nothing like this could ever happen again. And as for me, I kept my head down and did my job. I had earned this promotion, and I wasn't about to let Dan's chaos take that away from me. But that didn't mean I wasn't watching. I knew better than to assume the dust had settled. People like Dan didn't just disappear quietly. And I was right. Dan's last stand, about a month after Dan's meltdown, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Normally I'd let it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. Hello? Miss me? My blood went cold. I knew that voice. Dan, I said, my tone flat. Relax, he said, chuckling like this was all some kind of joke. Just thought I'd check in. See how things are going now that you've got my job. Pretty sure it's my job, Dan, I said, keeping my voice calm. And last I checked, you don't work here anymore. Yeah, about that, Dan said, his tone shifting. You really think this is over? I've got plenty more dirt. I know stuff that didn't make it into that email, stuff that could really hurt the company. And you, my grip on the phone tightened. What do you want, Dan? There was a pause. Then his voice dropped to a low, almost menacing tone. Let's just say, I'd be willing to keep certain things quiet if I get a nice little settlement out of this. I clenched my jaw. Typical Dan. Even after everything, he was still trying to manipulate the situation. You're delusional, I said, my voice steady. And if you're thinking about blackmailing the company, you might want to think twice. Legal's been on your ass since the day you walked out. You've got nothing left to bargain with. Dan laughed, but there was an edge of desperation in it. We'll see about that, he said before hanging up. I stared at the phone for a long moment, a sick feeling settling in my gut. Dan wasn't going down without one last fight, but this time, I was ready. The final nail in Dan's coffin. I immediately forwarded the details of Dan's little proposal to Richard. Within an hour, I was in his office. Richard didn't look surprised. If anything, he looked tired. I figured he'd try something like this, he muttered, rubbing his temples. Do we need to be worried? I asked. Richard shook his head. Not really. Dan's grasping at straws. He doesn't have anything we haven't already uncovered. Then why does it feel like he's still a threat? I asked, not bothering to hide my frustration. Because people like Dan don't know when to quit, Richard said, leaning back in his chair. But don't worry, we're taking care of it. And they did. Legal moved fast. They slapped Dan with a cease and desist order so tight that even thinking about contacting anyone at the company would get him hauled into court. They also filed a civil suit for breach of confidentiality, theft of company property, and defamation. Dan was out of moves. The cleanup and the new normal with Dan finally out of the picture. Things gradually started falling back into place. The audit wrapped up, and while they found some shady practices that needed correcting, most of the company was clean. Richard made sweeping changes, tightening policies, increasing oversight, and making sure that people like Dan could never abuse the system again. Chris's departure had left a power vacuum, but Richard was smart. He didn't rush to fill it. Instead, he took his time, bringing in fresh leadership and promoting people who had actually earned their spots. For once, things felt fair. As for me, I finally had the chance to do the job I had worked so hard to get. I built a team that actually cared about their work. I made sure deadlines were met because we worked together, not because I had to chase down people who didn't give a damn. And And for the first time in a long time, I liked coming to work. But that didn't mean I forgot. The lesson learned one afternoon. A few weeks after things had settled, Mike, one of the guys who had bought into Dan's nonsense during the sabotage phase, stopped by my desk. "Hey," he said, shifting awkwardly. "Hey," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Turns out you were right about Dan and everything else." I raised an eyebrow, waiting. Mike sighed. "Look, I was an idiot. I let Dan get in my head. I didn't think he'd go that far." I stayed quiet, letting him squirm for a moment before I finally spoke. "Yeah, Dan had a way of making people think he was untouchable." Mike nodded, looking genuinely remorseful. "I'm sorry for all the crap I gave you." I studied him for a second, then gave him a small nod. "Water under the bridge," I said. "But next time, trust your gut." "Yeah," he said quietly. Lesson learned. Moving forward as the weeks turned into months, I started to realize something. Getting rid of Dan and Chris didn't just fix the immediate problems. It created an opportunity for real change. The culture shifted. People started speaking up more, knowing that their voices would actually be heard. There was more accountability, more transparency, and the toxic boys club vibe that had kept Dan protected for so long, gone. It wasn't perfect. No company ever is. But at least now, it felt like we were moving in the right direction. And me? I didn't let my guard down. Not completely. I'd spent too long watching how easily things could go sideways. But I wasn't living in paranoia either. I had earned my spot, and I wasn't about to let anyone take that away. The next time someone like Dan came along, they wouldn't get comfortable. Not on my watch. Epilogue. One last surprise. A few months after everything had settled, I got a LinkedIn notification. "Dan has viewed your profile." I couldn't help but laugh. Guess some people never learn. I closed the notification and got back to work. Dan was just a bad memory now, and I wasn't wasting another second thinking about him. I had a team to lead, a career to build, and a future that had nothing to do with Dan. And that was the best revenge of all.